Showtime Moment 2 is a Trustmaster Ambassador. Throughout most of the military aviation history, women were not allowed to serve as pilots in combat units. Many of them flew instead in various support roles. Possibly the only notable exception to this was the USSR, which allowed women to serve as combat pilots during World War II. As for the US Air Force, women first served within the WAF, Women in the Air Force program. The program was cancelled in 1976, and women were from that point allowed into the Air Force as equal members, including the possibility to enroll in the Air Force Academy. Combat exclusion from aviation positions was finally lifted in 1993. The subject of our story, A-10 pilot Kim Campbell, call-signed Casey, which is short for Killer Chick, graduated from the Air Force Academy in 1997. At that time, percentage of women at the academy was about 16%. Born as Kim Reed, she initially wanted to be an astronaut, and she was rather unusually inspired by the Space Shuttle Challenger accident, which she watched on TV as a 10-year-old. The astronauts were all killed, but she felt it was important to do a job bigger than yourself and worth dying for. Her father, himself an academy graduate although not a pilot, told her that Air Force was a good way to go for a potential astronaut, believing his young daughter would probably change her mind very soon. But Casey's story is one of determination and persistence. After receiving a rejection letter from the Air Force Academy, she started sending them letters every week, explaining her readiness and motivation. It worked, because after about 2 months, she was admitted. Campbell faced more challenges, including air sickness, which troubled her during her initial pilot training. This resulted in her first and not very flattering call sign, Bags, as she often had to use paper bags in flight. Furthermore, a medical condition was discovered which could have prevented her from flying, but she came in contact with the Secretary of Air Force, who granted her an exception. Despite the challenges, Campbell graduated from the academy with great success and was assigned to A-10 training. She was still in training during the 9/11 attacks, and soon after its completion, her unit was deployed to Kuwait in early 2002, and after a couple of months to Bagram, Afghanistan. If you can't fly A-10 in real life, what is the next best thing you can do? Fly it in DCS World with the accurate replica of its throttle and stick, officially licensed by the US Air Force. Trustmaster provided me with their HOTAS Warthog controller, free of charge, in exchange for an honest review. I've been using it for more than a month. This model was released more than a decade ago, but despite strong competition, it still seems to have its place in the market. Its strongest point is probably the level of realism, as it very accurately resembles the real thing. The whole system is made mostly of metal and it's very heavy, more than 6 kilograms for both elements. The feeling is very good. There is a bunch of metal switches which require some force to operate. Throttle grips can be separated to control each engine individually. There is the shut-off detent which requires the throttles to be lifted. There is also the afterburner detent, which must be switched, as it's not on initially. I have to say I found the solution a bit awkward, since despite its weight, I often lift the entire base in the process. Throttle grips have on them a bunch of switches and hats. The stick comes with a detachable metal plate. It can be used on a desktop without fixing, even though it will occasionally move if you push it hard. Moving the stick does require some strength, which seems appropriate for an airplane without fly-by-wire. It's perhaps a bit hard to make precise moves around the center. I don't play helicopters much, but I expect the device might not be ideal for that purpose. There is no twist handle or any other control on the stick or throttle which might be suitable for rudder, so if you're going to acquire it, you might also need rudder pedals for the best experience. Regarding the stick itself, the most criticized element of it seems to be the gimbal system, which is outdated compared to some other models. On the other hand, plenty of people say that they had no problems with it for many years. I myself can't verify that from personal experience, as I haven't used the controller for very long. Who is the typical target customer for Warthog HOTAS? A hardcore sim enthusiast who plays DCS World or similar sims, and especially one who loves the good old A-10. And if you prefer the F-18, you can buy the Hornet add-on grip and simply fix it on the base. The accuracy and likeness to the control system in real A-10C are definitely the strongest points of this product, as they help with the immersion, which is why we play flight sims if you ask me. Campbell did a 3-month tour of duty in that country, but saw little actual combat, as the situation there was relatively calm in the period. The only thing she dropped was an illumination flare. She was the only female fighter pilot in the squadron, and one of only 43 female fighter pilots in the US Air Force at the time. But in March of 2003, her unit, 75th Fighter Squadron, was deployed to Al Jaber, Kuwait, in order to participate in the 2003 Iraq War, known as the Operation Iraqi Freedom. Again, KC's first missions in this conflict were relatively quiet. A-10s were mostly just trying to find targets over fast advancing American ground troops facing light resistance. They also did a number of drops on buildings such as weapon storages. But the situation changed when Baghdad was reached in April. Iraqi resistance stiffened, and American close air support aircraft were being stacked around Baghdad so they could provide quick assistance to ground troops. Casey was still a relatively inexperienced pilot, flying as a wingman on 7th of April 2003. The weather was bad with heavy undercast when she and her leader were called to support troops in contact at the Muthanna Bridge on the northern outskirts of Baghdad. US Army's 3rd Division units, which were waiting to be resupplied west of the bridge, came under fire from Iraqi Republican Guard, located east of and under the bridge. The 2 Warthog pilots couldn't see much of the ground, but Casey's leader found a hole in the clouds, pulled a split S and called her to follow. Campbell also dived through the clouds and immediately saw signs of combat on the ground. There were tracers and RPGs flying across the river, and flashes of anti-aircraft artillery shells soon began to explode around her aircraft. The 2 Warthog pilots first decided to make a gun pass from the north, attacking Iraqi positions under the bridge. After the lead pilot made his pass, the ground controller reported the attack was ineffective and asked for south to north passes. Campbell aborted her attack and the 2 Warthogs regrouped. It was decided to make 1 gun and 1 rocket pass each from south to north, followed by a turn to the west where friendly troops were located. This made their attack profile rather predictable and risky, but they had to provide support. After the passes, the A-10 pilots would climb and assess the situation. Everything went well until Casey's final rocket pass. As she was climbing away, she suddenly heard a loud explosion behind her. Casey's A-10 was most probably hit by a surface-to-air missile. The aircraft nose suddenly dropped, and as the ground was getting closer, Campbell realized her hydraulic system was completely empty. and the airplane wasn't responding to stick movements. She had two choices: eject or switch to manual reversion mode. This mode is a backup system which enables A-10 pilots to control their aircraft with cables and pulleys directly connected to control surfaces, similar to the way early pilots controlled their aircraft. But A-10 is relatively big and heavy, and manual reversion gives the pilot a rather limited control. Even so, Casey thought it was preferable to ejection over Baghdad, so she turned the switch and the airplane finally started to climb. Casey communicated over the radio a rather non-procedural "shit, two got hit." Her experienced leader advised her to jettison her payload and turn west over friendly troops. These things may seem easy and logical, but Campbell explains that they were very helpful, as she was a bit overwhelmed and focused on controlling her damaged aircraft. The two A-10s moved away from Baghdad and turned south. There was an option to try to go to Talil Air Base in Iraq, already under coalition control, but there was only one fire truck there and no hospital. So they went back to Al Jaber, Kuwait. Although she had difficulties, Campbell was able to control her aircraft in manual reversion on her way back. However, A-10 pilots in training only flew in this mode once for about 5 minutes. Landing was never attempted as it was way too dangerous. They didn't even try it in simulators. In Operation Desert Storm, two A-10 pilots attempted to land in manual reversion. One pilot was killed in the process, and both aircraft were damaged beyond repair. But Kim Campbell nevertheless decided to land. Visibility was poor due to haze, and she couldn't lower her flaps. She also couldn't land in the usual way, pulling the power back on landing, because in manual reversion, aircraft nose would suddenly sink. So it would have to be a Navy-style power on all the way landing. Just before the aircraft touched the ground, it suddenly rolled left. But Casey was able to roll it back and land smoothly. Over 600 holes were counted in the A-10, and it's presumed they were caused by a surface-to-air missile. The airframe never flew again, and it was stripped of valuable parts before the unit moved to a location in Iraq. It's now on display at Seymour Johnson Air Base, North Carolina. Kim Campbell served 2 more combat tours in Afghanistan in 2005 and 2010. She was a squadron and a group commander, and she eventually retired from the Air Force with the rank of colonel. She flew 1,800 hours in the A-10 with more than 100 combat missions. Her husband, Scott Campbell, was also an A-10 pilot who flew combat and was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross 3 times. Kim Campbell is now a keynote speaker and book author. Her mission from April of 2003 is a testimony to her skills, but also to great survivability of the A-10, which is still in service as this video is produced, more than 50 years after its first flight. Thank you for your time. Please consider becoming a Patreon supporter or donating on PayPal to keep the channel in business, and keep watching Showtime 112.